Okay, so today we're starting our elephant project, and this project is going to be broken up into a few segments, but we're going to start with the body first off, because we can't have an elephant without a torso. So you guys are going to get a certain amount of clay, and you're going to wedge it first, but you're going to do this in two pieces, two equal-sized pieces, and the best way to do this is to weigh it. You can put one piece in each hand and kind of weigh it back and forth. But as long as you've broken them into two equal pieces, you can begin wedging them and doing exactly what we did with the pinch pot, which is wedging, then tapping into a roundish shape. And then you can use your wood block to get any of those other corners out, and then rounding it even more with your hands. If you have any folds or creases or seams, you can smooth them out with the back of your nail or a tool or just your fingertip, whatever you need. They're not super detrimental. But once you have those two equally sized pieces, and double check with me before you start this, you're going to make a pinch pot. The biggest difference here is that I'm not looking for a base. This pinch pot needs to be 1/2 of a circle. So we're going to keep the walls and the floor pretty even, and then tap it once against the table to see if any of your sides are thicker or thinner than the other. It might tell you to remake it. But then you're just going to do exactly the same thing to the other one. And you want to maintain a certain amount of thickness in your walls with this, because we are going to be connecting these two pinch pots together. And if your walls are too thin, then they won't stick together whatsoever. It'll be weak, and you will hand it to me and I might pop it and tell you to start over. Take your time creating these. The inside can be ugly. That's okay. The outside can be ugly. What you're really going for is that equal size, so that they fit together kind of like this. You don't want anything hanging over another edge, approximately the same size. That's what you're going for. So once you have this, we have to do something called slipping and scoring, and this is a method that you'll use in most of your projects from this point out. If you took two pieces of clay and tried to stick them together, not much would happen. So instead, what we have to do is something called scoring, which is scoring the clay, kind of cutting into it a bit, going a multitude of different ways so that we give the clay some teeth so that it kind of has some grip. But then once you have those teeth cut in, you don't cut too deep, you spray it or put some water on there and rub it into your finger until you get this shiny wet stuff, and that's called slip, clay slip. It's like a thin little watery mud. It'll act as our glue. So if we had two pieces that were scored and slipped on both sides and then we stuck them together, it wouldn't come off. It creates, again, almost like a glue. Anytime you attach a piece of clay, you have to slip and score it. That's just a rule. Sometimes if your clay is really, really wet, you don't need to, but most of the time, better safe than sorry. Because if you don't slip and score it well enough, when we fire it, it'll pop right off. So with this in here, we're going to slip and score the entire top edge of your two pinch pots. Both of them, not just one. Now, be careful not to cut too deeply into your pinch pot. You don't want to completely destroy your edges. I usually keep my needle at a pretty low angle and just trace through it kind of shallowly. You don't want to do this. It'll demolish your edges. You still need to maintain that flat surface. So cut into it all sorts of ways, not just one direction. Again, give it those teeth that are going to lock together. Take your spray bottle, kind of do a loop, make sure everything's a little bit wet, and then use the tip of your finger to rub into that until you see that slip. And then once you have those two pieces, you're going to take them in both hands and firmly press them together without popping it. Put a lot of pressure on your fingertips, not in the palm of your hand, because you don't want to crush it. You just want to press them together and twist a tiny, tiny bit. But that'll secure them and keep them from blowing apart later when we fire it. But we can't exactly leave this ugly seam now, can we? So with the back of your needle tool, you're going to kind of carve into it a little bit. A lot like slipping and scoring, but with the back end, it's more like blending. You're going to tie this up like a zipper. And see how I'm making a lot of X's and going back and forth, kind of getting in there, getting messy, but not popping it. It's delicate. Okay, so once you have that zipped up, what we need to do is blend it together with our fingers because we want this body to be smooth. So we're going to take just a regular finger, no water or anything, and we're just going to kind of push those sides together. You should have two little humps on either side of the valley that is the seam that you just covered. You're going to almost push the clay from those thicker areas into that little divot where the seam was. You should not have a visible seam when you were done. If I can look at your elephant's body and clearly see a little depression or a ring around the middle where you connected those two pinch pots, that is a problem and you will have to redo it because that means it'll be weak. And we don't want weakness in this. This has to be very sturdy. So once you get the worst of it, it should look kind of like a sphere. Now what we need to do is we need to take our wooden block and we need to paddle it into an oblong shape or something kind of like an oval. So you roll it between your hands to kind of get an idea of the shape that it should be, but then focus mainly on one side and then round it out into the ends. See how I'm just kind of rocking the sphere back and forth and it's gradually starting to get longer. That oblong shape is starting to appear. Again, this should not be a perfect sphere. This should be longer one way than the other. The paddling does take time. It may not seem like anything is happening, but don't get discouraged, and eventually you can kind of roll it between your hands to get a better shape. And you should have a lovely body. It won't look perfect. This is one of those projects that has a really long yucky stage. That's okay. As long as it is sturdy and kind of smooth, we are ready to go for the next lesson.